So we're going to be covering a topic that is really lends itself to showing a lot of functionality within VantagePoint. And it's meant to give you the ability to really maintain the integrity of your assignee list. Oftentimes you'll have an analysis of many organizations, and you want to depict this graphically in different ways through your reports and so forth. And you want to keep the small companies as well as the intermediate companies as well as your very large companies together in your analysis. And so we're going to be identifying these individuals, these small companies, small meaning the number of documents they have in the data set that you're working with, and work with that information. What do I mean by these small groups and so forth? Think about a graphic that you need to depict all the data within your analysis. Here we have the beginnings of a group of companies, individual companies. But if you think about it, you can't put this into a report. This long tail of different companies with different number of documents. Showing this a little more graphically or on a list, if you think about looking at a list of companies, it's just a matter of going down the list, and how do you manage these long lists of companies that have very few documents, but you'd still like to identify them because they may have significant IP in them. They may have started earlier in the technology that you're looking at. You might want to manage it a little better. And so in this other graphic, you'll see where we're identifying items where there is one company or one document per company, 2 to 3 documents per company, but we're keeping it with the larger companies, the companies that have larger portfolios. Siemens, we've identified hospitals and universities, and we've called those institutions. We've also identified individuals where the document doesn't have any identifying company on it. It's individual inventors. So we want to maintain all of this information and take what we have over here, this long tail, and put it into a manageable set of documents. I mean, set of records that we can compare in our reports and so on. Now, this is what we want. We don't want that long tail. We want to have our companies and so forth in the data. If we think about this, the small players are very important. Who are all the innovators? And the analysis is going to allow us to keep the big and the small together. And we're going to be doing a lot of grouping in identifying these individuals and so forth in terms of grouping capabilities. The technology right now, this tends to lend itself to a technology analysis. Oftentimes you'll look at a company and you'll see where their dominant IP is based on IPCs and so forth. And you'll ask the question, well, who are the competitors based on an IPC or an IPC in combination with keyword search to develop a data set that we then further analyze. We're going to look at the priority information of these groups, these individuals, these institutions, and so forth, and identify maybe the possibility of earlier entries into the technology, and discover that the main players may not be the earliest adopters or have the priorities that we want. And also look at this through protected, where the information is protected. So a bunch of functions we're going to cover. I think you're going to find this interesting. And to me, this is the very essence of VantagePoint, the ability to manipulate lists, generate groups, and build additional fields from your group information. We're going to use list comparison between the assignee list and the inventor list to identify the individuals within my assignee list. We're going to be adding selections to groups to identify our top 20 and do other identifications. We're going to be using a thesaurus that I quickly built to identify universities, hospitals, research institutions, basically non-company entities. We're going to use the edit groups capability, where we're going to org different groups, combine information to help us understand what we've identified and what we need to identify further. And we're going to take and invert selections to really look at those other documents and break them apart into different groups, such as companies that have 6 to 20 documents each, or companies that have 4 to 5, and so forth, and keeping those smaller players, the companies that have only one. And finally, we're going to build sub-data sets off of these different groups and look at the geographic reach and so forth. So a lot of flexibility in this presentation, and I think it's going to be allow you to see some tips that you may not understood or maybe not been fully aware of when you use VantagePoint. So I'm going to toggle over to the platform and start working with the data. Now, this is the S&E data. This is PAT-based data. Let me go back to the home ribbon, and I'll filter to PAT-based field called probable. And these are probable assignees. I've cleaned it, and that's something else. Before we even go into this process, we clean the data. And then opening this up and making this into a list, and just make this larger, we're going to, whoops, I'm going to go back and bring this over and make it larger so it helps everybody see the information. Something that I'm keen to do, allow you to understand this data better and follow along. So what are we doing here? We're going to start building these different groups, one of which is the list comparison to identify the inventors. So we have this list, and I'll just bring over, just to kind of make it easier to understand, what do I mean by list comparison. If I go back over to the summary sheet, and I'm going to open up my inventors and look up my inventor names, just open that up. And I'm going to ask the question, I have many inventors, I have many assignees. I would like to know, identify, and if there's any inventors alone on this list that I can then group. So the way you do that is under the Analyze tab, you go to List Comparison. And we're going to take all the items in this list, and we're going to look at, compare it with another list, which all the items are, and look at the inventor names. And we're going to use fuzzy matching. Just, the variation that the inventor name might be in this list might be different from the variation in the field that contains the actual inventor names. It might have initials and so forth. And we'll use the fuzzy matching rule set called general. This allows you to go to the library, but we're going to call these the group that generates, because this generates a group, things that are in common, not unique. And I'm going to call them the inventors. And let it run here. It's going to take a second here to just build through and give us this group. Now, if I sort this, you'll see these are all inventors that are in the assignee field. So now we have our inventors. Let's go and identify in this list all of the universities and so forth. And they tend to be small onesie twosies, but if you go down here, you'll notice that the universities are in the data, and I'd like to kind of put them into a bucket or a group all of their own, and go in and just identify them using what we call, if I go back, the ability to group a list using a thesaurus. We're going to scan the entire list of assignees, and we're going to use a thesaurus that I've built. And we have make sure that you see our YouTube channel. We have lots of very helpful information. So for example, building or putting together a thesaurus, in this case, looking for institutions, governments, universities. And if I open that, And then I'm going to basically have a field that's called this information. And so if I just click OK, it's going to then give me those. Just go back up here, back to the top, and you'll see Stanford University, the hospitals, and so forth in this data. So now we have this group of information. I'm going to now look at another thing, which is I want to keep the integrity of my more active companies. So if I look at just sorting on records, I'm going to look at the top 20. So just it's an arbitrary thing. I tend to work with the top 20, but it's up to you. It's up to you, whatever your needs are. And really, if you think about it, the ultimate goal is how to manage this in a graphic. You don't want to have too much information, but then again, you don't want to have too little. And we're going to right click and add selection to group. And we're going to call these our top 20. Okay, so far we have identified inventors, institutions, and top 20. How can we then work with the remainders? Well, that's where the edit group functionality comes in. If we select all of these and we OR them, and I'm just going to work with this temporarily, we're going to be able to identify those all together, what we've identified or what we've so far grouped. If I sort this is going to give me all of the information that so far we've grouped in this list. Now, if I right click and invert selection, I'll have everything that we haven't grouped yet. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to add this to group. So add to group, add selection to group. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just go through and work with putting this together in terms of the different uh, buckets, if you want to call them that. So, for example, we have the 20, the 19, and so forth. And I'm going to just arbitrarily, again, just kind of come up with a group. And I'm going to say my companies that have between 6 and 20 and add this to group. So add selection to group. And I'm going to call this my 6 to 20 per company. And you'll see where I'm headed here. I'm now going to go and scan through the list and look to, and again, decide my 4 to 5 records per company. And I also tend to, you'll notice there's 208 titles. So I tend to use this to gauge the buckets in a way, just to help me understand the numbers that are in these different groups. And if I right click, add selection to group, this is called my 4 to 5. So 4 to 5 per company. Going through my 2 to 3s, just real quick here. Oops, just go up a little bit. Add to group. And then lastly, these smaller selections, these companies that have only one document within the analysis per company. And just select all of them and right click and add selection to group. Okay, so we have all of these groups and so forth, and we've completely grouped the entire list. And so we're going to then go through and build a new field, which is a combination of the top 20 along with these other groups, the total number within these groups. And how do we do that? Well, it's basically using the merge fields capability, but we need to make the fields first. a little tidying up. I don't need this group anymore. It was just one to help me understand what was left to group. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to basically take that and I'm going to delete it. Okay, so what do we have left? Let's start building these groups, these fields from either groups or group names. So first of all, I'm going to take my top 20 and I'm going to make a new field from all the items in this top 20. Just go back up, just sorting top 20. And if I go to field group items, you'll notice that if I have it sorted on an item or a group, it'll automatically generate that field. But I want to do something and not automatically generate that field because I don't want to carry these groups along with these fields. So group items, and I'm going to pick my top 20, but I'm also not going to keep groups. And then click OK. So this is my first field that I'm going to add to. I'm going to go back to that list, and now we're going to build out the others field, which is basically these other groups. And I'm going to go create field from group names, and I'm going to pick everything but not my top 20. And I'll just call it groups and click OK. So now we have these elements just basically together as items within a list. And by merging this list with, if I go back with my top 20, it gives me the target information that I'm then going to use in the further analysis. And merging fields is, notice here, going to merge fields. These are all the fields. And I'm going to take my top 20 and add that. And then I'm going to take my groups list and add that. And, there are no groups, but just to be safe, I'm going to not take groups. I'm also going to call this new field my target, and click OK. So now here we have the data that we're going to work with. And we can do things like if I select this list, go over to reports, and understand just the breakdown of the information, my large companies and so forth. This technology, by the way, is medical imaging capabilities, and it's a relatively new area using AI to a certain extent, machine learning and so forth, and a lot of individual players, or I should say smaller companies, which is indicative of a newer technology. And so it's one of these measures that you'd like to kind of do with respect to all the technology within the analysis. Let's look at another report. I like the Gantt chart to show the entry into the data or into the field. If I select my Gantt chart, I'm going to take that field that I just built, and I'm going to look at all of those new entities, and I'm going to compare the earliest priority information. So I'm looking at the earliest priority information compared to the earliest or the publication years, and open that up and just get a comparison. So it's just going to build through this matrix and give it graphically. And lo and behold, you'll notice that these smaller companies, they tend to have entered into this technology way back. And you begin to look at these companies and you can identify them further. If I go into my probable and look at the cleaned assignees and make this bigger, and allows me to, within this priority group of individual companies, if I wanted to look at the particular company that I'd like to see information further about, I could go in and bring this up and look at that data by drilling down and looking at the record. So it's always handy to have this type of analysis. Again, keeping the data, the integrity of the data by bucketing everything. The other thing is looking at if I go back, I think I have my targeted list here. I'm just browsing back to another sheet. Again, I'm going to make this bigger. Let's say that I would like to know the layout or the breakdown of the larger companies. I can go to that list of top 20. If I just browse through this, you'll notice that I have already developed this list, made it into a field. And if I go into and select it, I can go over and make a sub data set. So I'm just going to create sub data set and click OK. And now I'm working with just those larger companies if I'd like to look at that and understand the geographic information by virtue of the world map. And allow me to identify the information on the world map of that company, of those top 20 companies. Going back, if I wanted to, I could take make a sub data set of just that information of the smaller companies and create a sub data set. And again, just the selection, and it'll build out, just allowing us to go with that information. And then build out and look at this, compare the two. So if you just look at this information and just compare the two, you might be able to see variations between the top 20 companies, the larger companies, and the smaller companies, and so forth. So that was pretty much what I'd like to cover in this. And if there's anything that you'd like to know further, we do extensive training. I'm here to help. You can call our help desk, get answers from our individuals that man the help desk, but I really appreciate your time and thank you.